Warning: 50 States, 50 Murders is a podcast based around true crime. Please be advised of the horrific details of murder, abuse, and sexual assault, occasional adult language, as well as brief humor. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
What do you get when true crime sounds like folklore? This is 50 States, 50 Murders. I'm your host, AJ. Sadly, Sarah's still away traveling, but have no fear. We are back with another mini-sode. And this one is going to be stories that sound too weird to be true. The ones that feel more like urban legends than police files. I've got 6 cases that all sound like myths. Mysterious, dark, and simply just hard to believe. But they actually happened. Or did they? So grab a flashlight, maybe double check your locks, and settle in for this week's mini-sode. Let's go ahead and call it Murder or Myth. As always, a big thank you to all of you listening and tuning in each and every week to 50 States, 50 Murders. Once again, I am your host, AJ, and Sarah is still out of the office. She actually had back-to-back travels, so I'm really looking forward to her returning back next week and just kind of spend a little bit of time talking about her travels. I actually had a travel trip myself over the holiday weekend, so I'll go ahead and say that, and we'll just kind of knock all of our travel discussion out at the same time. This week, we will be taking up another mini-sode, just like last week. Hopefully everyone enjoyed last week's Final Meal episode. This week, it's going to be a little bit different. So to help set the stage, let's go ahead and imagine that we all are sitting around the bonfire, sharing some ghost stories. There we go. So I have 6 tales that I want to share with all of you today. 6 stories that sound so unbelievable, there's no way that these could be real. As mentioned, this segment, we'll go ahead and call it Murder or Myth. Maybe one of these 6 stories might be so crazy, it'll still make you wonder, did that really happen? Let's go ahead and kick things off. We'll call this one The Chimney Corpse, Joshua Maddox. In 2008, 18-year-old Josh Maddox vanished after telling his sister he was going for a walk near their Colorado home. A situation that we certainly can all relate to. Who hasn't went outside and simply went for a walk around their block? In Joshua Maddox's case, however, it had been 7 years. 7 years of going for a walk and never to be seen again. 7 years later, his body was discovered in the chimney of a cabin just blocks away from his home. He was inside the chimney, upside down, naked with no clothes, in a house that had been abandoned and padlocked from outside. The original homeowner moved out, a new owner tearing the cabin down, thus making the discovery. I think that would be a pretty interesting discovery, to purchase a new home and to be doing some renovations, let's call it. And in the midst of demoing you happen to come across a corpse. That's probably one of the last things you would expect. Termites, rats, bugs, these certain things, unfortunately, black mold. These are things that are all possible when it comes to buying a new home. But a corpse, that's something that usually is not expected. Now, the authorities called this accidental. Said maybe he was trying to break in from the roof. But Josh was an athletic, intelligent kid with no known issues. And the house, honestly, there was no reason to enter. Now, some believe it's foul play. Some say it's just a tragic fluke. But either way, it's a mystery that still doesn't sit right. A kid, a walk, gone missing for 7 years, only to be found in a chimney upside down naked. For our next tale, we're going to go back in time, all the way back to 1897. And we're going to travel to West Virginia to learn about a ghost who solved her own murder. This is the story of Zona Hester Shue. In 1897, in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, a woman named Zona Shue was found dead. Her husband said that she simply fell ill. Now, the doctor, he wrote it as childbirth complications. Odd, because she wasn't pregnant. Zona's mother never believed it. I mean, how could you? Childbirth complications for someone who was never pregnant seems like a pretty hard pill to swallow. Weeks later, Zona's mother claimed her daughter appeared to her in a dream. Not once, but for 4 nights in a row. And the reason for appearing in her dreams was to tell her the truth. Her husband, Erasmus Shue, had broken her neck in a rage. Now, after these dreams 4 days in a row, Zona's mother pushed for an autopsy. When Zona's body was exhumed, her neck was in fact broken in 3 different places. Erasmus was convicted of murder, and the ghost's testimony was admitted in court. As it stands, this is the only known U.S. case where a ghost allegedly helped convict a killer. Murder or myth? Both. It's on record. Moving forward, we're going to jump to 1911. This is the case of the carnival corpse, Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy was a failed outlaw. In 1911, he robbed a train. And for all that, he got a whopping $46. Unfortunately for Elmer, he did not get to spend that $46 because he was killed by a posse. Here's the thing about Elmer McCurdy. After his death, no one stepped forward to claim his body. So the undertaker embalmed him with arsenic and stood him up in the funeral home for display. For a nickel, you could see the embalmed bandit. Unless you're someone who is beyond blessed. We can all relate to a time where we've had to go to a funeral home for unfortunate circumstances. Now picture walking into a funeral home to say your goodbyes to a loved one and just hanging out in the corner. You have the embalmed bandit. Now, as far as today's modern era goes, I'm not sure on the legality on what just propping up a corpse is, how that looks, if that's even okay. But again, keep in mind, 1911, this is essentially the Wild Wild West. A train robber who was murdered in the process of their $46 heist and now is propped up for your entertainment. With just 1 nickel, you could see him hanging out. Now, years later, 2 carnival workers tricked the mortician, claiming to be Elmer McCurdy's family, and they then took the body. Now, from there, Elmer McCurdy continued doing what he has been doing, and that was becoming an exhibit. He was passed around from carnivals to wax museums to haunted houses for decades. His body slowly dried out and turned mummified until people assumed he was just a creepy mannequin. So at one time, he was an exhibit at a funeral home. He was then purchased by carnival workers, once again for profit. However, he was passed around so many different times that it was actually unknown that this was a real human body. People just thought this was a prop. That was until 1976. A film crew at LA's The Pike Funhouse moved what they thought was a dummy, and the arm snapped off. Now, inside the arm that snapped off, an actual real-life human bone. Turned out it was McCurdy, the real guy. 65 years after his death, he finally got a real burial. Our next story is the death of James Dean. James Dean was a famous actor, and this was for a death that took place in 1955. So we're slowly working our way back up the timeline here. Now, this story may sound eerily familiar to let's call it a Hollywood horror movie. The only difference is this is a real life story. James Dean died in a 1955 crash behind the wheel of his Porsche 550 Spyder, a silver car he nicknamed Little Bastard. After the accident, the car was sold for parts. What followed is a string of bizarre and deadly coincidences. A mechanic lost his leg while working on the car. A buyer died in another car crash with its engine. The trailer hauling this car had burst into flames, and a display stand that the car sat on collapsed and broke someone's hip. Even creepier, this car, nicknamed the Little Bastard, disappeared in the 1960s. Gone. Vanished mid-shipment. Never seen again. Some call it cursed. Some call it a legend. But the deaths, the fires, the facts, those are all real and extremely well documented. What's left? A ghost story on four wheels. As we continue working our way up the timeline, we are in 1951. This is the story of Mary Resner. Mary Resner of St. Petersburg, Florida, was found dead in her home in 1951. Her body was nearly completely incinerated, reduced to ash. Only her foot remained, still in a slipper. The chair she sat in was destroyed, but strangely, the room around it, mostly untouched. No accelerants, no fire damage to the rest of the house. Investigators simply couldn't explain it. Newspapers called it spontaneous human combustion. And to this day, no one knows how she burned like that without burning everything else around her. An official report labeled it an unusual heat source. But what source? A cigarette? A freak chemical reaction? Or simply something else? Mary Resner's death is still unsolved and still cited in science and paranormal circles alike. Real case, real autopsy, real mystery. Fast forward to 1996. We have our sixth and final story for Murder or Myth. This is the story of the vampire cult killer. In the mid-90s, a 16-year-old Kentucky teen named Rod Farrell wasn't just obsessed with vampires, he believed he was one. He told his friend he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. Together, they formed a self-declared vampire clan. drinking each other's blood, performing rituals, and even branding themselves with occult symbols. But things took a much darker turn in 1996. After running away from home with a group of teenage followers, Rod led them from Kentucky to Florida, where one of the girl's parents lived. He claimed they had mistreated her. One night, he broke into their home and murdered both of them with a crowbar. The father struck over 20 times. Rod later claimed he felt nothing during the killings. They stole the family's car, burned evidence, and fled across state lines. But they were eventually caught in Louisiana. When police interviewed Rod, he confessed casually, as if recounting a dream. He showed absolutely no remorse. He was convicted and initially sentenced to death, becoming one of the youngest people ever on death row in the United States. His sentence was later reduced to life in prison. But his legacy still chills anyone who hears it. Because the scariest thing about monsters is when they think they're real. And sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. He's riding shotgun. So as we conclude today's mini-sode, as we sit around this fictitious bonfire of ours, did any of these stories send chills down your spine? Or were they just tall tales with a twisted edge? That's for you to decide. But before we go, I want to leave you with 2 questions. 1, what's the line between belief and delusion? And when does it become deadly? And 2, if a ghost legitimately helped solve a crime once, how many others have been deemed crazy or ignored? So there you have it. A body found in a chimney 7 years later. A ghost that returned to her mother's dream to help solve her own murder. A carnival corpse passed around for years. You had a haunted car. There was the woman who went up in flames without a spark. And lastly, we had our vampire cult jumping state lines. Sometimes the real stories are stranger than the made-up ones. And I think that is what makes them so scary. If you like this mini-sode, let us know. Maybe we will make a return on Murder or Myth. Sarah and I will be back next week with another full state deep dive. Until then, stay safe, stay strange, and stay tuned in to 50 States, 50 Murders.